What's going on, you guys? Zeke Carnes here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a very interesting topic at hand. We're talking, of course, about my personal experiences with what I could only call or refer to as the paranormal. Today we're going to look at my personal experiences and why I am such a firm believer in something beyond this world. I don't believe that when we die it's just the end of the road. I believe that there's a whole new adventure, if you will, waiting for us after this life, and this life is simply just a stage in our existence. So, there's going to be two different houses we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the first house that I lived at when I was just a child, a very young child. My grandmother's house, to be more specific. And we lived with her for the first few years of my life. So she passed away on Christmas Day of 1995, unfortunately. So we lived there up until then. And I had just turned 5 the month before. My birthday is in November of oh my god, my birthday is in November. I was born in November of 90, and my 5th birthday was just a month before, a little over a month before she passed away. And I don't have a whole lot of memory with this house, but I do remember the feeling. And this feeling that I'm going to be talking about is going to be very crucial to this video, because it's something that I feel like if you haven't experienced it, you're never going to experience it anywhere else, any other way. It's just a heavy, creepy, ominous feeling that there's really no other way to describe it unless, of course, like I said, you've experienced it yourself. And only being 5 years old at the time that my grandmother passed away in the house, well, she basically became brain dead in the house, but up until that point, there had been a lot of experiences with the paranormal in the house, mainly from my mom, who grew up in the house from a child to a grown woman, to having her own kids, such as myself and my 2 siblings, and also myself and my older sister. My younger sister was way too young. She was only 3 years old, 2 years old, sorry, when my grandmother passed. So she was still, she wasn't even a toddler yet. So my younger sister was spared the creepiness of the house, but my sister, especially my sister and myself, were not. And my mom also grew up in the house. And I'm not going to really linger too much on this house here because, like I said, I don't really have much experience with it myself. But there was one instance, I should say. There was one instance where there was actually a memory that I will never forget. And we were in the living room of this house. And I believe this had to have been, my grandmother had already passed away, so I'm going to say this was probably maybe in January or so of 1996. So, just a month, maybe a couple months after her death, so maybe February of 96. I'll never know the exact date, so forgive me, but we were in the living room and we were watching a movie, and I even remember what the movie was about. I was only 5 years old at the time, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And the movie we were watching was about a plane disaster. Like the plane explodes in the air, kind of like Final Destination would do later. And people were being sucked out of the plane. I remember just being horrified as a child, like thinking, oh my god, this is, I never want to fly in my life. Just being a kid, it scared me. And I remember sitting there, and for some reason we were watching it in the dark. And why we would, especially in that house, I'll never know. But we were all laying out in the living room watching this movie, and all of a sudden, this heavy, depressive, ominous feeling just laid out itself over all of us. And it's almost like we all kind of sensed it at the same time. And I remember looking back at the hallway, and the hallway was just the blackest of black. It was just like a black abyss is the best way I can honestly describe it to you. And there was just something horrifying about it. So we all, it's almost like we all felt it at the same time. It was just a really scary feeling of being watched. And, maybe being a child, or maybe being, just scared of the unknown. It was scary, but that doesn't mean it was something harmful. It could have, who knows what it could have been, depending on what you believe. It could have just been us in a dark house, and our imaginations caught the best of us, though I find it really hard to believe that all of us had the same experience at the same time. I find it really hard to believe. And other people would say it could have been the spirit of my grandmother watching us, or some kind of other entity beyond this world. And, we'll never know. But I'll never forget it. Like I said, I was only 5 years old. Barely 5 years old, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. That's a pretty impactful memory, if you ask me, and enough to impact my memory permanently. It's quite interesting. We're going to kind of move away from this house, but one other thing that had happened was shortly after my grandmother had passed away, my grandmother wore a very specific, very unique perfume. Something that I do smell from time to time on, not like, oh, she's around me, not like that kind of thing, but I have actually smelled older women with it. It's kind of like an older woman perfume, but you don't smell it often. It's rare, but when you smell it, you know it. And since her death, I've only smelled it, that I can think of maybe twice on different women, and it was just very unique, and I knew it was her perfume. But we would be at the house, and my mom would be out in the kitchen cooking, and my mom told me about an incident where she was cooking, and all of a sudden just a huge smell, like, just engulfed her face and her sinuses, and it was the smell of the perfume, and she just froze and got the chills, and it scared her, but it was also, I don't know the word for it, but my mom said that it did scare her, but it was also kind of comforting in a way, and she just froze and said, "Mom, you can't do that to me. You can't scare me like that." Whether it was really my grandmother or not is up to interpretation, of course, but smelling that perfume, if I spray that perfume for you to smell, you'd never forget it. It's a very specific smell. It's strong, but it smells really good. So that was the story of that house there. Now moving on to the more interesting house. Of course, we're talking about a house that, like I said, we lived from about 2004 to 2005. And there was just something different about this house. Like I said, that ominous, heavy feeling was back. Now, it's important for me to note that after we moved out of my grandmother's house, we actually, God, my eyes keep watering. We actually moved into an apartment and lived there. Well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. We lived in a house after we moved out of my grandmother's house. No fillings, nothing like that. Had a great, couple years or so there. Then after that, we moved out of there and we moved into an apartment complex. Same thing. No ominous feeling, no feeling of being watched. It was just a nice little apartment and felt happy in it, felt secure. Then we moved out of there and we moved into this third house, and this is where things kind of came back. This is kind of where the ominous feelings came back, the creepy feeling watched feeling came back, and as I said, this is very vital that in the previous two homes that we were in, the house and the apartment, we didn't have this feeling. Nobody felt uneasy. You could walk through the house in pitch black and you'd feel fine. Where I live now, you can walk through this house and feel fine. I don't get creeped out at this house at all. I could walk outside in pitch black. I could walk into my backyard in pitch black, and it does not creep me out. This house was on a completely different level than this house and my previous two houses before it. So, when we moved in, everything seemed okay and whatnot and fine, but that didn't last long. There was something about this house, like I said, that unless you know the feeling, the ominous feeling is the only way I can describe it to you, you're never going to understand the experience and how I truly feel like something was there. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's just your imagination. Oh, you just want to believe it because you believe in the paranormal. But this is the kind of stuff that made me believe in the paranormal. It's not the other way around. It's not like I went into this house like, there's something here. I need my ghost equipment. It was never that. I moved into this house with no intentions of ever having that feeling from the old house again. And it just came back. Now, you have to forgive me, 2004, 2005 was quite a while ago. You know, that wasn't yesterday, it wasn't just a couple years ago. But there are some instances that stand out in this house. One of them was you could not walk through the house in the dark. It was just not going to happen. I had my own room at this house, and I remember having to go to the bathroom at night was the worst thing in the world that could happen to you. And the best way for me to describe it is my room was about like here, and the bathroom was down a hallway and just right around a corner here. So it wasn't really that far of a walk. And during the day, it was just a little tiny walk that, you know, you wouldn't even think twice about taking that walk to use the restroom or to take a shower, bath, whatever you were going to do. At night, the house changed at night. There was something different about it. And I remember, like, probably one of the first nights in that house, just feeling really uneasy being alone in my room. My two sisters shared a room to my right, and I was in the middle room, and then my mom and her husband shared a room over there. I guess you could call him my stepdad, would share a room over there. And so I was like in the middle between their rooms in the bathroom. And I remember opening the door, and just, it was nothing but black, and it was like, it reminded me of what I said earlier in that other house, where it was just a complete, deep, pitch, ominous black. You know? I mean, where I live now, you can pitch black it, but it doesn't feel ominous. You're just like, oh, the lights are off, whatever, I'll just walk through it the best I can without running into furniture. Here, the best thing I could do was get to that hallway light as soon as I could. That was the best thing I could do. Or the kitchen light, actually. I think I had to reach for the kitchen light, which was straight ahead, because the hallway light, was, of course, all the way at the end of their end, so I couldn't just reach out and turn on the light like that and end the creepiness. I had to reach into the darkness to turn on the light. You want to talk about scary, especially when you're only, like, how old was I there? 13 and 14 years old? Go spend a night in that house with no lights. It's not fun. So that was an experience there, was going to the bathroom or just having to walk through anywhere through the house in the dark. You just felt like something was watching you from the shadows. And just thinking about it is just creepy as hell. It's just like, whoa. Just making me really remember how scary the place was. Another experience we had was the power went out. Dun, 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 dun. And the girls, my younger sister and my older sister, came running into my room because they also knew the feeling, and they knew I was alone, so they wanted to come be with me in my room, so we were all three together in the dark, so that if a boogeyman or monster came, there was three of us and not just me by myself in my room and them in their room. Unlike the horror movies, we stick together, we don't split up. And I remember just being so scared and horrified, and nothing really particular about that night happened, but my freaking stepdad, he was a heavy smoker, and he got up to have a cigarette in the middle of the night, and the power was out, and he pulled the blinds off of the sliding glass window and made us all freak out. My younger sister about had a heart attack, but it turned out just to be him. But the power going out in that house was like the worst thing that could happen. It's like, oh my god, you know, darkness is everywhere. There's nowhere to hide. There's no lights to get away from it. And so there's two more instances I want to get to. I'm trying to hurry the video. I don't want to ramble too long. But another instance we had was actually my stepdad had this by himself. And my stepdad wasn't one that made up stories about the paranormal ever. I mean, ever. And I can't stress that enough, that he never talked about the paranormal or anything like that. And one day I woke up and I came out, and he was ready to tell us about something that he had saw the previous night, because as I previously mentioned, he was a smoker, and he would smoke at all hours. He would smoke in the middle of the night. He'd get up maybe have to use the bathroom and decide to have a cigarette out back. And he said that he got up early in the morning that morning. And I want to say it was probably a weekend because I slept in. I didn't have school that day, so I remember he was sitting on the couch and he said, "Hey, you want to hear what I saw this morning?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he had already told everybody else because I was the last one up. And I was like, "Yeah, sure, what happened?" And he told me that he had always felt that there was something here, and we had all shared this belief. And he told me that he was sitting on the couch watching TV, and all of a sudden in the corner of his eye, he noticed something, and he looks out into the kitchen, and there he described it as, and he did exactly this. He's like, it was just a black silhouette that just went from the hallway area, which was near my room, charming, and went into the garage. Just walked right past him in the kitchen and went into the, well, I shouldn't say right past him. He was in the living room, and the kitchen was all the way like closer this way, and said that it just walked right past and went into the garage. I don't think I ever slept right again after that story. So speaking of the garage, another story took place there. My mother, just as we were just discussing all this stuff yesterday, because I had brought up to her, I said, that house that we lived at, there's something creepy about it. She's like, yeah, there was. And she remembered an incident. She had told me this before years ago, but she retold me last night. She told me she was out there doing laundry one day, and she was just folding stuff on top of the dryer after it had gotten out of the dryer, and all of a sudden she felt, and mind you, this is during the day, that she felt just something that was just standing behind her watching her fold laundry, just watching her. And she just said she just stopped, looked over her shoulder, and just got this dreadful feeling that she needed to leave the garage. So she ended up just stopping what she was doing and just walked into the house and shut the door and locked it, and was just like really creeped out that day. And I'm guessing that might have been a day we were all at school or something and she was home alone, I'm not sure. But that was another experience with the garage, one that she had with the garage. And the final one that I can remember having with that house, I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, of course, like I said, this was many years ago, but of course, the final experience I had was actually my final experience with the house completely. It was the night we moved out. Everything had been going normally. We had a U-Haul there. We had a huge construction light because we were working into the night because we had to be out, and because the owner sold the house, so we were no longer able to rent it. They wanted to own the house and live in it, so we had to move out. That really sucks when that happens. And we had relatively short notice, so we were working into the middle of the night, and we had finished everything and everything was done, so the house was empty. It was, all of our stuff was out, and we were just grabbing our pets. We had a couple cats, I think, a dog, and a couple dogs, and we were leaving. And I remember sitting in the, what do you call it? I was sitting in the truck and just backing out and just looking at the house. It was pitch black. We turned off all the lights, of course, because that was what we were asked to do by the new owner. We turned off all of the lights, and as we're backing out, I'm just staring at the house, and just this uneasy feeling of just being watched from the house. Like, almost as if whatever was there, and probably is still there to this day, was just watching us leave. I'll never forget that, and it gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I talk about it. It's just not something you ever forget. And there was so much creepiness about that when we were driving away. And I couldn't look away. It was just like a car wreck, or a train wreck, where you want to look away because it's horrific, but you just can't. Curiosity gets the better of you, and I remember just staring at it until it was out of my view, and just being like, I'm so glad I don't have to go back to that house. And that's pretty much it, guys. It's the paranormal, if you will, experiences that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video here because we're at 20 minutes. Sorry for long-winded, but I wanted to try to get all the details out there. So if you guys have paranormal or anything like that you want to discuss in the comments below, go ahead and leave a comment. Thank you for watching. This is Heath Carnes. You guys take it easy, and I'll see you guys in the next. Peace. Be safe, and don't be haunted.